the time and freedom independence is really that time freedom, that time independence is what I've always craved. And that was before people worked remotely and things like that. I've always wanted to be able to do what I want when I want.
This is Dana Samuelson with the American Gold Exchange. You're listening to the Average Joe Finances Podcast with Mike Cavagioni.
Watching this on YouTube, make sure you smash the like and subscribe buttons. If you're listening to our podcast, go leave us a 5-star review. All of our links can be found in the video description or show notes below. Hey, welcome back to the Average Joe Finances Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cavagioni, and today's guest is Charlie Hardage. And I'm really excited to talk to you today, Charlie, because being a fellow veteran and just some of the things that you've been through, we talked a little bit offline about that. I'm excited to have a conversation with somebody of your stature and what you've done and accomplished, especially with transitioning out of the military and going into real estate. I'm really excited for this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Man, Mike, I'm so excited to be here. We had an awesome conversation before. Hopefully we can continue that for the next 30 minutes or so.
Absolutely. I almost wish I hit record before we even started this, just to get some of that golden content there that we had just in that conversation. And I've had other people tell me like, dude, just hit record as soon as you start the meeting. You could edit that out. And I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. And I never do it.
And never do. It's okay.
I just never do it. But you know what? I could set up the Zoom to make it that it records as soon as the meeting starts. But some people want to have that pre-convo, so it's all good.
Yeah, there you go.
But Charlie, dude, this is awesome. I want to start this off the same way we start every show. And I'd like to know more about you, even though I think I know a pretty good amount now at this point, but my audience needs to know who Charlie Hardage is. So if you could share that with us, that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. So I live in Nashville now. I'm from Dallas, Texas originally. Man, I grew up, and I didn't know it at the time, but I grew up middle-class mindset. I think I was the epitome of rich dad, poor dad, because my dad had multiple master's degrees, extremely intelligent, and always working his way up the corporate ladder, doing well. My best friend's dad, when I was like 10, 11 years old, it's still a good friend to this day, but he was an entrepreneur. Now, not specifically real estate, but just always had different tech companies and things like that. It was weird, Mike, because he was always around. He wasn't traveling a week out of the month or whatever. He was going to sports games, taking us places. Whereas my dad was working a lot and traveling. And so I'm like, how's this even possible? That was 10, 11, that was a while ago. But fast forward, I went the school route and college, all that. And when I got out of school, out of the university, I worked selling computers for a very large company for little over 2 years. But I was 25 at the time. I said, I don't want to do this right now. I want to join the military. And so I went into the military. I was infantry. Mike, to me, that wasn't like, oh, I just want to do it. It was a career move. I wanted to go. I went enlisted. Even though I had a degree, I went enlisted. You don't make as much money as officers, but
that's just how bad you wanted it, though.
And I was at a desk job before, and I wanted to not necessarily be at a desk job. So I chose infantry. I chose enlisted because I wanted to have fun. I've seen all the movies. Audience has seen all the movies. You wanted to have some fun, right? And so I went in and enlisted, and with the goal of one deployment, and then I'm going to put my what's called packet. Some other branches call it package. But basically put all my paperwork in, turn it into the Army HR department, and then go the officer route. That didn't end up happening for various reasons, but I did 2 deployments, and on my second deployment, I got shot, and I was medically retired. I went back to the only thing I knew, which was IT sales. Did that for about 6, 7, 8 years, somewhere in there. I don't remember. But man, still this whole time, I had this burning desire to be my own boss and get into real estate because I wasn't smart enough to start a multi-million-dollar or billion-dollar tech company, wasn't smart enough to do a lot of these other things. I'm like, I can do real estate, right? There's a lot of dumb people making good money in real estate. And for me, it wasn't really
Hey,
even about
I resemble that remark.
Hey, I wasn't talking to you. I was talking about other people, man. For me, it wasn't even the money, it was the time freedom, right? Going back to 10, 11 years old, my buddy's dad was always around. He was working, but he was home too, a lot more than most people that I knew at the time. That was even before dial-up internet, I think. So that was, or maybe it was a 16.6 modem. But anyway, so I just had this desire to get into real estate, started learning as much as I could, listening to podcasts, but man, I wasn't focused on one niche. And that really held me back for years and years. And so I finally found multifamily syndication. That's what I'm doing now. A big group of people pool their money together and buy these multi-million-dollar apartment complexes. And one person couldn't afford this. Institutions can afford it, but not one person typically. But we pool our money together and have the buying power of now these institutions. And so it's awesome. I absolutely love it. I left my day job about a year and a half ago, a little more than that now, and love what I'm doing. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's what a story. And having your dream job taken away from you with what happened on your second deployment leaves you like at a point where you're just like, okay, what now? And I wonder, is that something that you struggled with, especially when getting out of the military? Did you have any type of identity crisis? Because I know when I retired not too long ago, but since being home, I've had that like identity crisis from what I was used to during my military service to like now being a civilian. And I'm just like, this is not the same. And this is not how things were when I was in, and I can't curse as much type deals. It was a big life change for me. And I'm curious if you actually ran into any struggles with that when it comes to the actual transition out.
Yeah, just a side note, Mike, for the audience that doesn't know, if you curse more in the military, you actually get pay raises and bonuses. So that's why everyone does it. But not really, Mike, because my wife was 7.5 months pregnant when I got shot. And so I was just so happy to be alive, and I was able to hold my daughter. I really didn't think I was going to be able to. My right arm, it hurt so much to move it that I didn't think I was going to be able to hold her. And so I was able to hold my daughter when she was born. And like, for me, I was like, I'm alive. Now, it took me about a year and a half to process out of the military, out of the Army. I was going to a bunch of appointments. And so my duty station, instead of reporting and going to formation and being in our area and training and all that, mine was really just the hospital and doctor's appointments for probably a year or so. And during that time, on my second deployment, I did read Rich Dad Poor Dad. That's where I got more fire. But really,
the bug bit you.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's heard that book. I heard about that book, but it's a good one.
People in my audience, I don't think they've ever read that.
Good. I'm glad I could recommend it. But for me, I was happy to be alive. I did have that real estate bug. And because I was going to my doctor's appointments and I wasn't with my unit from 06 to 1900 every single day, I had so much time, so much free time. And so I was at home with the family, with my newborn, with my wife. But then I was actually reading a lot, which I didn't do much of, but I read a lot, all real estate. So it was really a good time for me to just learn more. And I knew when I got out, I knew I wanted to do real estate. I didn't know how I could make it a full-time job, but I knew IT was there. I knew that was a means to an end. So fortunately, I didn't have any identity crisis. I also wasn't in for 20 years like you and a lot of other people that retire us. I was in for almost 5. And man, I was just so happy to be alive. So I didn't worry too much about some other stuff.
No, that's great, man. What a great perspective to have, right? Especially being in such an experience like that. And in that moment, your wife was 7.5 months pregnant. I can only imagine the thoughts that were rushing through your head as you were getting medevaced out. So yeah, that's definitely a great perspective. And so on that deployment, you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, you got the real estate bug, you processed out over like the next year. What was the next step after you processed out into your real estate journey?
Great question. I actually got my real estate license.
Okay.
That was really more to understand the real estate market. It was just a residential single family agent. What I didn't like about that, Mike, was really nights and weekends. And my daughter was 1.5 at the time, 1.5 to 2.5, 3.5, somewhere in there. Most people want to see a house nights and weekends. That didn't work for my family and my schedule. So I did end up going back to the corporate world. But what I did learn about getting my license is a lot of terms that I didn't know before. And so I view that to be a successful real estate agent, or excuse me, investor, you don't have to be an agent. That was just my path to start dipping my toe in the water, because I knew I wanted to do real estate full time. If I could also do it as an agent, great. I just didn't like it. So that's when I went back into the IT world.
Nice. Yeah. So I did something similar. Actually, I got my first property and then I got my real estate license. And then after I got my real estate license, I was still active duty when I was doing that. I was doing just referrals.
Okay.
And that was awesome because basically all I had to do was give a name to somebody else on my team.
Yeah.
And if that person bought a house with them, I got a chunk of that commission, which was
Yeah.
awesome. Easiest money I ever made.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm digging this real estate thing. And then I retired and decided, I'm going to try to go full time as a real estate agent. But I retired and started going full time right as the market turned. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not really sure about this right now. So I actually went back to being a referral agent. And also I took a Fed job recently that pays quite well. And it's allowing me to continue doing what I want to do. Although in terms of my passive income, I've already reached the textbook definition of financial independence, right? Like all my expenses can be covered by the passive income I have coming in. I could stop working today and I'd be fine.
That's awesome.
But I want to continue to grow. I want to continue building wealth and building generational wealth for my children, because right now that's my goal, is I want to give them the best possible life that I can give them.
Love that.
And the way I look at it is, I could take easy street and just chill out, but do I really want to sit here and just scrape by, especially when I live in Hawaii? Like it's so expensive here. Just scraping by here is just, what's the point? So it's all about what your goals are, what your perspective is. So I think you and I have similar goals when it comes to why we're doing what we're doing. And actually, to get that whole piece put out there, if you could, Charlie, go ahead and tell me, what is your why? Why are you investing in real estate?
There's two main reasons and then some sub reasons, but number one, the time and freedom independence is that time freedom, that time independence is what I've always craved. And that was before people worked remotely and things like that. I've always wanted to be able to do what I want when I want. So that's number one. And then number two, my family, I want to give back that generational wealth, but then also I want to help the community locally. And as far as the subheadings, I recently, about a year ago, I just figured out I do have PTSD. And I've been out almost 10 years. I was shot 11 years ago. I got out about 9.5 years ago, somewhere in there. And I just about a year ago said, I think I have PTSD. And so I went to some doctors and yes, I do have PTSD. What we want to do is, and this is my wife included, but we want to do two charities, two organizations. One is, and she has a master's in nutrition. So she wants to help with food waste and helping the less fortunate. And then I want to do like a veterans nonprofit. And maybe it's not necessarily even our own, but we partner with established nonprofits because PTSD is absolutely real. Doesn't matter. You don't have to be in the military to have PTSD. And I truly believe there's different phases of it, right? Just because you don't wake up with night sweats or bad dreams doesn't mean that you don't have PTSD. And I have bad dreams monthly, one or two. And so I was like, oh, well, I'm fine. But maybe mine's a little more mild than other people, but just want to help other people.
Yeah, no, that is a righteous cause. And as coming from somebody who was diagnosed with PTSD as well, I really appreciate the effort that you're putting into what you believe in helping other veterans. And not only veterans, but like you said, there's folks, you could suffer from PTSD for anything, right? I mean, you could witness something that messes you up, right? And it's just something that people need to recognize and get the necessary help for, so that they don't do something drastic later on. And I'm glad you were able to recognize that and get the help that you needed, just as much as I was glad that I recognized it for myself too. So that's super important. So if, especially to my listeners right now, I know a lot of folks are in the military. If you feel like you're struggling with something, please go reach out and get the help that you need. I think that's super important.
Yeah, and I want to add just
Yeah.
something, Mike. There's a lot more resources today than there was when I got out.
Sure.
I think it's being destigmatized, which is amazing. But having PTSD doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you different. Your mind works slightly in a different way, but that doesn't make you bad or anything like that. If I love saying this, if you are sick, you go to a doctor, right? You get the help you need. If your mind is not right, if your mind is sick, go to a mental doctor, whether that's the VA or somewhere else, because they actually can help and you're not weak. So anyway, just wanted to add that.
Yeah, the VA's been great for me, man. Like they got me help with a mental health provider. They got me to a chiropractor for my back issues and everything. Like they've just been, I know people crap on the VA all the time, but I feel like, you know, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and I was very annoying with some of the issues that I was having. And they said, okay, hey, Mr. Cavagioni, we got you. Let's go take care of this. Right. So yeah, I think that's super important that you shout until you get the help that you need.
Right.
All right, Charlie, we've talked about a couple different things here, like about what led up to you getting into real estate. Now let's actually talk about what it is that you do in real estate, because this is something I'm excited about, because in our pre-recording conversation, you were like, I do this. And I was like, holy crap, I do that too. So let's talk about that. So I'm really excited about this. So obviously you're in multifamily real estate, right?
Yep.
So I'm going to ask you this. When you got into multifamily real estate, did you start off as an active or passive investor?
Passive investor, man. Mike,
that's how I started too. What do you know?
Man, honestly, when I first heard about syndication was about 10 years ago.
Okay.
And I actually thought it was a scam because I had never heard that you could invest in anything passively except IRAs, 401ks, and a stock market, right? So I was like, from the active side, I understand it, but the passive side, obviously that's too good to be true. But about 4 years ago, I kept telling myself for years, I still have it today. I have a little post-it note. What is the cost of inaction? I knew what I was doing was not going to work for me long-term, Mike. And that was the slow path of pinch pennies, IRA, 401k. And I didn't have control of my money. Just because the stock market goes up 7-8% a month, that it doesn't necessarily mean that's in my account. Heck, that's not even in my bank account. That's potentially in my IRA that I can touch in 40 years. So for me, I knew I wanted out of the stock, or I wanted to diversify from the stock market. And when I went back and looked, I was frustrated. I was struggling. I was like running in quicksand and concrete because I feel like I'm smart, but I did not know how to get out of the rat race and hit my time freedom that I wanted to reach. So I went back to syndication and started learning more about it. And 8-9 years ago, I heard about it from one person. I'd never heard about it anywhere else. But then as I listened to podcasts, I started hearing more about it, but still not quite sure how it worked. So about 4 years ago, I was like, okay, there's got to be something out there. I'm going to go back to syndication and just see, is this true or not? Did my due diligence, which I should have done 5-6 years prior, but I got into it. I understood it now, and I was like, I got to do this. So when I got into it, it was as a limited partner. I got into 2 deals within 3 days because I was just like, I got to do this. I used my HELOC, which we talked about before. And I got into 2 deals, and man,
we talked about that before we recorded, so we're going to get into that too here.
Yeah, thank you. I got into 2 deals with my HELOC, and man, when I got home, this is pre-COVID, small bank, so I had to actually go up there to sign the paperwork. I got home, I wired the money, and I was like, my time clock, my financial freedom clock just started ticking down. It was still 7 years out, but it started ticking down. And that's what I was craving for the last 25 years. And man, I just was so touched, so impacted by it that I just had to share it with everyone. Fast forward a few months, I was like, wait, I want to do this actively. So I started learning as much as I could about it. I was in grad school, I was working 40 hours a week. My daughter was in gymnastics 20 hours a week. So I'm like, when she's gone, when she's here, I'm going to spend time with her. But when she's gone, that's when I do my schoolwork. That's when I learn about real estate. And man, I just felt like this huge rush of just like, finally, I found my calling. I found what I was put on this earth to do. And what's cool about it too, Mike, is talking about the active side. I love helping. I do love giving back. I truly feel like being in the active side, you are helping people, you are giving back, because some of my investors are immigrants, they're military or still in the military, never invested in anything besides 401ks and IRAs. When I talk to them about it, they're just like, wait, what? Where I was 8-9 years ago, this is too good to be true. And then afterwards they invest and they're like, thank you. I still to this day have investors that have invested with me years ago that are like, thank you. Thank you for sharing this with me. I love that.
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely awesome, Charlie. Cause like when I got into multifamily real estate, I was still active duty in the Navy. I was struggling with a rental property that I had 5,000 miles away back in Virginia. COVID just started. I couldn't fly out there if there was any issues. I did everything sight unseen. I had pictures and videos sent to me. So any work that was getting done to the property was done that way. I don't know if it was even done properly. Just
Right.
It was all this stuff that was up in the air that made it very difficult. And then my GC was also my general contractor was also my property manager, which I don't recommend you do that. Have them be two separate people. So it was definitely a struggle. And then I discovered this ability to invest passively. And I said, okay, this is where I need to be at right now, especially while I'm active duty. And I just think it's a great thing to be in. And again, too, it's funny because I thought the same thing. I was like, what kind of scam is this? Like, I just put the money in, I get this return, then all of a sudden when they sell the asset, I get all my money back and then some. It just doesn't feel real. But for me, one of the things that I did that helped make me comfortable, and this is something I recommend to anybody that gets into passive investing as a real estate syndicator, that you do your research on the GPs that you invest with, look at their track record, but also look at the deal itself. Just because you see something on a slideshow and it looks pretty and all these numbers look great, do your research on the actual market itself, right? Go see what the other properties are renting out for, see if there really is that value add, go look at the job market, see what's coming in, look at what industries are there. There's all these different KPIs, key performance indicators that you want to look for that will give you that warm and fuzzy to say, okay, I'm going to wire you $50,000 to $100,000 to invest in this asset.
Yep.
I think if you do that, you really get yourself in a solid position as a limited partner as well.
Yeah.
For me, especially like the first time I ever wired that money, it was my goosebumps were sticking up and the hairs on the back of my neck were going. I'm just like, oh God, here we go.
I hope they got the money.
It was a little bit easier. And then the third time I was just like, here, take my money.
Yeah.
So
man,
yeah,
I love what you said too, because the most important thing, your audience is trying to get into a deal or interested in looking at a deal as a passive investor. It's so much more important to look at the team and their track record. Let's say this is your first deal as a general partner, that doesn't matter about you necessarily, right? You look at the whole team, because I like on my very first deal, I had people that had $3 billion of acquisition. So they look at me and it's, okay, you haven't done anything. I'm like, you're right, but I've partnered with these incredible people. The numbers, that's what a lot of passive investors look at to begin with. And those are so easily manipulated. I could go and turn a deal from a 60% return to 150% return by changing one number. I could do it in 2 seconds. So don't focus solely on the numbers, even if the numbers are super enticing. Talk to your sponsors, talk to the team, understand them.
Yeah, most good GPs are going to be very conservative with their numbers. They're going to underpromise and overdeliver, and that's what you want, right? You want to go into a deal and be like, okay, I'm going to get a nice little return and that's it. And then when you get hit with that huge return, it's bam, okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's one of the teams I invest with. That's what they do. They're very big on underpromising and over delivering. And I was talking to you a little bit about this off camera, but like this one deal that I was in, within 20 months, I got this nice fat 21% return. I got the check on my birthday. It hit my bank account. I'm just like, okay. And this was the first syndication I went into. And I got to really know and trust these guys over a year before I even invested in a deal with them. I went to all their pitch calls for 3 or 4 other deals before that and didn't commit until that one when I felt like I was in a comfortable position to do it. And that was just my path. Some people will just go to their first pitch and say, okay, hey, this is great, I'm in. For me, I needed to see a couple, and I wanted to see their track record because they were a newer team as well. And they just absolutely crushed it, knocked it out of the park. It's all about your comfort level, right? And when you're putting these large amounts of money in, you got to be comfortable. Okay, so Charlie, for you, so you got into the passive side and then you really enjoyed that, but you wanted to make more of a difference and help other people. So you got into the active side. So tell me a little bit about your active investing. Like, what kind of markets are you in? And what are some of the things that you target when you're looking for your next syndication?
Right now, Mike, we're primarily in the Southeast, or we are in the Southeast. Like I said earlier, I'm based in Nashville, so I only look in the Tennessee market, but I do partner with other operators outside of Tennessee. By the time this airs, we're going to close on another property in Tulsa. But the big thing that we're looking for, Mike, is how can we add value to a property? Doesn't necessarily mean it's rehabbing it or like a fix and flip, basically. Sometimes it's operations as well. Ideally, we're looking for 80 units and above. Typically, a C plus property that we can turn into a B property. The properties that we have are in B class areas, and some of them are like a C plus property. And through renovations, rehabs, we've turned them into a B minus B, whatever you want to call it. But we look for markets that are business and landlord friendly. That's not just the states, that's also the cities, the MSAs, the metropolitans, the statistical area. We look for growing jobs, growing populations, diverse economies. We don't want to be stuck in something, let's say, just oil and gas. And when, that's very cyclical. And so when that hits, we don't want to be screwed. So we look for markets that have a lot of different jobs. And I personally like military bases because I know how that works. We won't look at every area just because there's a military base there. It's only specific areas that have other growth and other industries there. But yeah, man, some of the things that we've done are the rehab side of it, but then some are the operations side. So we got a property in San Antonio right next to an Air Force base that is the previous owner had renovated almost every unit. And they had a single family. He was an absentee owner out of state. He renovated a lot of the units, but then had a single family property manager running the property. They never toured the property unless there's an issue. And so we were able to go in there and run it like a business, run it like an apartment complex. I don't remember the amount of CapEx or rehab that we put into it, maybe 100,000 at most, I think. And we've been able to hit pro forma rents, like year 2 pro forma in 7 months, just because we were running it so much more efficiently. But yeah, so that's the operations side, but we're just looking for value add.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, Charlie, because I find that most deals that syndicators take over and are able to turn very quickly for a profit are the ones that are poorly managed. Right. Yep. Usually the mom and pop ones that have been there, they've owned the property for 20, 30 years. They raised rent maybe twice since they've owned it. And they have a couple vacancies or folks that are just staying there for free because they just never wanted to kick them out. So things like that. Yeah. You can like really spruce those up really quickly.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, Charlie. So there was another thing we talked about pre-recording, and this is something I'm really excited to talk about with you. And I know that you also do velocity banking with your HELOCs. Now, you had mentioned taking HELOCs out to invest passively in those syndications. And I've had other people scold me on that because I did the same thing. I took a HELOC out, put it into some syndications, but at the same time, my 5-year locked in rate, and I was going into a HELOC. I had a 5-year locked in HELOC but I was going into syndications that we're looking at a 3 to 5 year exit. So I felt really comfortable and confident in doing that. So I wanted to get like your thoughts on one, velocity banking, and two, taking that money and putting it into a syndication.
Man, yeah, I don't know if I've talked to anyone else, Mike, that has done velocity banking. I've seen videos online about it, but not actually talking to them like we are now. And the fact that you're doing it is great. What I will say about it is it's a totally different mindset change and shift. Not everyone's going to do it. Not everyone wants to do it. A lot of people are probably going to say it's stupid. It doesn't make any sense. But
actually, Charlie, before you go any
Yeah.
further, just because you're talking about the mindset about it too, like the way I look at it, because a lot of people like to look at the short-term rental thing, right? And they say, oh, you rent the place and then you short-term lease it out, right? And you do this rental arbitrage. The way I look at velocity banking is it's debt arbitrage,
yeah,
right?
100%.
I'm utilizing that debt at that percentage rate to get a return at a higher percentage rate to offset it and get free money. So now I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, no. And that, man, that's where I was going next with this. So we took the HELOC out. We started to do the velocity banking. We had money left over on the HELOC, so we got into two passive deals. And to be very fair and transparent, that's probably the slowest way to make money, right? But at the time, my HELOC was like 4.25. It's 8 now, 8 something now. I don't care. I do, but I'm still going to get a 20-30% return, annual return on that. So I'm using our local credit union's money to make a lot more money. And the way I did it too, Mike, was, okay, if I paid, let's talk about velocity banking. If I put $50,000 down on my property, let's just say, and it took on my primary mortgage, it took me 12 months to pay that back. At the time I had an introductory rate. You pay the HELOC down all the time, so you're not paying interest on $50,000 the whole year. You're really probably paying it on $25,000.
That's
right?
the big difference between amortized interest and simple interest.
Yep. For me, instead of paying, and I'm going to actually pull up my calculator really quickly, but $25,000 times, I'm just going to say 6%. I'm paying $1,500 in interest in 1 year, but I'm saving $32,000, I think is how much we saved. I'm saving 7 years off of my home. Why would I not do that? But then I was like, I have money left over. What am I going to do with that? I invested it. And so again, same numbers. If I'm paying $1,500, $2,000 a year, but I'm going to end up making $10,000 a year on average, why would I not do that? I'm 5Xing not even my money, the bank's money.
Yeah.
So why would I not do that? Now I'm using that HELOC though, not the passive side, but for active. And so there's a lot of different benefits with that. Probably don't need to get into all those, but there's acquisition fees and asset management fees and things like that were even 5X. So we're pretty much 25Xing our HELOC interest rate right now, which is
that's
amazing.
awesome.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about it too. It's really, it is debt arbitrage, right? You're taking that lower interest rate, getting a much larger interest rate of a return and offsetting it and making a profit on not even your own money, on the bank's money.
Yep.
And that's the way I like to. So I really like the way you explained it, because I do have a lot of trouble when it comes to trying to explain this to people. And they're like, oh, why are you doing that? Why are you borrowing money to make money? I'm just like, because one, the things that I'm investing it in are much safer investment vehicles than if I was to take that 50K and dump it into the stock market. Shit could hit the fan and that's it.
Yeah.
Usually, and especially if you do your research and everything, the real estate deals you get into are much safer. People are always going to need a place to live. Real estate's always going to be here. A company that you invest in could have one bad CEO come in and make a really crappy decision. And next thing, the $50,000 that you put into that is now worth $9,000. So it could be very painful. So that's the way I look at it.
Yep. Yeah. And I don't know if it's necessarily for everyone, right? But
Sure. There are some people that are very debt adverse.
Yeah.
I get it. And if you are, this is not the route for you to go. But if you can understand how to offset your debt and leverage it, you'll love doing velocity banking.
And in the people that are debt averse, I would actually challenge them and say, you're not taking on more debt. You're actually paying your debt off much sooner.
Sure.
We're going to be able to, we didn't start this velocity banking till about 3 years of living in this home. We're going to be debt free in about 2 years, like totally debt free, house, all the cars, all that, and have so much money in the bank. And so that's only because of velocity banking. The other route for me, Mike, was cool. If I live here, if I own this property for 30 years, then maybe I'll pay it off in 26, 27 years because I was putting a little bit more money down, like $50 a month. But then at that point, I'll be at retirement age, and now I have my 401k. So we're just able to use the exact same money that we're coming in. I didn't take another job. In fact, I left my job. My wife and I both got master's degrees, right? So we had all these expenses. We didn't pick up extra jobs or win the lottery. We're just able to use our money in a completely different way, which is, when I heard about it, when I learned more and more about it, I was like, this is too good to be true. This is awesome.
Yeah. And the other thing I like about it too was just the liquidity about it. So
Mhm.
for me, I've used it as a safety net. Like when I first retired from the military, like my pay was all messed up. Everything else was like, it just, things were not looking pretty for the first couple months. I was able to use my HELOC to offset a lot of those
Yep.
expenses. And then when I got back, paid it right back.
Yep.
So that was one of the beautiful things about that. And I paid maybe $100 of interest over like those 3 months for the little bit of money that I borrowed to offset that cost.
Otherwise,
I mean,
you would have been using credit cards and
yeah,
probably
absolutely.
thousands of dollars as opposed to a HELOC.
Absolutely. That's one of the beautiful things too, is like you can consolidate your credit cards all into the HELOC. If you're a points person, like I've been trying to work on figuring out the best way to do points. And I've actually had somebody on the show that like talked points and stuff, and it was great. And I was like, I really wish I could do that better myself. But
Yeah.
one of the things I like is I have my Amex Platinum card, so I use that for everything, rack up all those points, and then I pay it off right away with the HELOC, and then I pay the HELOC down when I get paid. It's bonkers, but I'm able to rack up all these points as well. Maybe get a couple free flights a year.
Yeah.
That's one of the awesome pieces about it. Okay, you said in about another 2 years you're going to be like completely debt free, right? The house is
Yeah.
going to be paid off, the cars, credit cards, everything. Are you still going to have money on the HELOC, or is that going to be paid down as well?
Oh no, that's all going to be paid off. We're actually going to go and get another HELOC and keep doing that to get bigger properties too.
When did you start Velocity Banking?
About 3 years ago, I would say.
Wow. And you got it done that fast. So it's crazy. Like the way that I have mine set up, like I could pay off my house in 7 years, right?
Yeah.
Now I don't want to, because I have a really low interest rate on my house, 2.25%. What I want to do is pay it maybe about halfway down. Because I'm in a very expensive house. I live in Hawaii, so I'll be realistic here. I'm in $1 million home, so I want to pay it halfway down. What's that?
It's a studio, isn't it?
No, it's
just joking.
2,000 square foot home, but
Hawaii's expensive.
but I want to pay it down about halfway, just so I have that liquidity, so I could have $500,000 at a whim if I need it.
Yeah.
If that really good deal comes up that I want to get involved in, boom, okay, here, I'll write a check or I'll wire the money. It's just there. That's what I like about the HELOC. It's the liquidity piece of it. I've got a buddy of mine that's doing a couple deals. They're doing development over on the Big Island, right? I want to be able to just drop $100,000 every now and then and say, hey, let me help you with your next project. And that's just what I want to do. And that's one of the ways I'm going to be able to get there, is by doing this velocity banking methods. I geek out about this. Too. That's why I'm really excited to talk to somebody else that does this. Like I've had people on the podcast that come on and talk about it, but that's literally our whole conversation. But most people are doing it just to pay their home down early.
Right.
I haven't really talked to too many other people that do it as a real estate investor like me. That's why I was like, dude, we started talking before I hit record. I was like, we're going to hit it off good, Charlie. I mean, this is good stuff. All right, man. Okay. So we talked about a lot of great things, right? We talked about your military service, your transition out, the struggles that you've dealt with, what you got into real estate, right? What made you get into that? Reading Rich Dad Poor Dad on your second deployment. We talked about velocity banking. We talked about how you use it to get into real estate. We talked about your active deals, your passive deals. So much good stuff here for my listeners, that there's so much for you guys to pick from if you want to focus in on something. So Charlie, with that being said, what I'd like to do now is transition this into something that I call the final round. Mm-hmm. It's where I'm going to ask you the same 4 questions I ask everybody that comes on the show. It gives us an idea of how you're going to be under a little bit of pressure, which I think we all already know you're going to kill it just from this interview alone. So if you're ready to go, we'll get this thing started.
I'm ready. Let's do it, man.
Okay. Charlie, first question of the final round is, what's the biggest mistake you've ever made when it comes to your finance or business life?
Man, I have two. The first one is not for real estate. I'm going to say not being focused on one niche. I was all over the place. And then the second one was really just,
We're like real estate investing twins.
yeah, I was all over the place, man. From the just financial place in general was really not educating myself on what else is out there because I listened to everyone, the school, what school teaches, what family and friends teach. And so I was just not seeing what else was out there.
Yeah. You were basically listening to everything else and not focusing in on one thing, being a jack
Yeah.
of all trades and master of none.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
that is something I still struggle with, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll tell you, I feel like I'm still all over the place. If a good deal comes up, even if it's not multifamily, like if it's a good single family deal and I'm like, this looks good, I'm going to buy it. So it's just a matter of, for me, I'm an income enthusiast. If it's going to make me a good return, I'm interested. Just keep me away from all that MLM crap. Okay. All right, Charlie, next question of the final round is, what is something that you've learned that you wish you knew when you first started out?
Man, I love this question because I thought if I had a great deal on the active side, when I have a great, syndicated property, and I know it's great, I thought I could send one email and people are my phone would die because people are calling left and right and texting. I wish I knew that. I wish I could go back and start telling people from day one, like why real estate is so great. Heck, why even HELOCs are so great. I wish I told people what I was doing, be active on social media, just so I would be better at raising capital. That's what I wish I knew sooner.
Okay, right on. I appreciate that. That is one of the things I like to talk about as well, because it's one of the ways I've been able to build up my real estate business and just everything that I've done with my investments was thanks to my podcast and putting myself out there.
Yeah.
Being very active on social media, telling people what I'm doing. I've been a little bit quiet lately, there's just been a lot going on. We had to put our dog down last week, which really sucked.
Oh, man.
So there's just a lot of things, but being able to focus and put yourself out there, letting people know what you do, people are going to reach out to you. If they know, hey, Charlie's investing in this, and they see something that might catch your attention, they'd be like, hey, Charlie, check this out. You might like this one, or I've got a deal that you might be interested in. I think that's one of the things that's great about putting yourself out there. So
Totally agree.
absolutely love that. Okay, Charlie, next question of the final round is, do you have any tips or tricks that you would recommend to someone that is just getting started out today?
Yeah. And Mike, this is slightly also probably aimed at you a little bit because you said you're all over the place and an income enthusiast. But I think for me, and to be honest, like where I was years ago of all over the place, no idea what's going on, figure out what your goal is. I knew my time goal or my time freedom, that was my biggest goal. So work backwards from there. How can you reach that? Is it single family? Not for me. Is it Airbnb arbitrage, all these other things? For me, it was, what is my actual goal and how can I get there? I wish I focused on that sooner as well, because now I'm on the right path. It took me 7 years to get here though.
Yeah, no, you got to nail down and focus in. So I really appreciate that. And I will take that advice to heart. It's one of the things I do struggle with a lot. Even this year alone, I actually had to scrap my vision board halfway through the year and start over. And this was thanks to a conversation I had in the mastermind group that I'm in, because I was focusing on a business that I had that was failing. And instead of giving it up, I was just doing everything possible to try to revive it, not even realizing I lost $40,000 in the process of doing that.
Yeah.
So it is really good when you got somebody that could like tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, listen up, maybe try this.
Yeah.
So I love having an accountability partner. That's why I love being in a mastermind. It's one of those things that kind of helps me stay focused. Even though I know I still have a lot of work to do, I know I've got people that got my back, Okay. So Charlie, the final question of the final round, and I will preface this with, besides your own, because I know you started one recently, do you have a favorite business, investing, or real estate related book or podcast, or both?
Ooh, great question. I'll say two, they're by the same authors. Who Not How was huge. Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. That was really big for me because it's don't try to figure something out. try to figure who can help you, not what do I need to do. So that was good. And then what I'm reading right now, man, this to me is extremely powerful. It's The Gap and the Gain. And for the audience who maybe have not heard that book before, and I'm only a third of the way through, but it talks about the gap and the gains. Instead of looking like where I am today, and this hits home for me, man, because if 3 years ago when I started my investment journey, or my actual, investment journey in apartments, I was like, in 3 years, I wish I could do A, B, and C. I've crushed those goals, man. And I'm still not happy. I'm not where I want to be. So the book talks about, don't look at the gap of where you want to be and being upset. Look at the gain. What have you gained in those last, in my case, 3 years? 3 years ago, I would have been so pumped. And now here I am. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not where I want to be. So instead of focusing on the negative, focus on the positive.
Yeah, I love that. That's great recommendation. I don't know if I've had that one recommended yet, so that's good. Definitely Who Not How. I've heard that several times, so that's still on my list to read. But The Gap in the Game, yeah, definitely going to add that to the list.
Yeah,
awesome. Okay, Charlie, that is it for the final round. Pat yourself on the back. You survived. Great job. I knew you would. But okay, that is it for that. So I know that was the final round. I said I have these final 4 questions I want to ask you, but I do have another question I want to ask.
Sure.
And this is going to be the most important question of the entire interview, because like I said before the final round, we touched on so many different topics, and you did give us a lot of golden nuggets to go off of. And again, I feel like a lot of this is still just scratching the surface. People are going to want to dig deeper into something. Maybe they want to know more about specifically velocity banking, or specifically the stuff that you invest in, or maybe they want to invest with you. So Charlie, where can people find more information about you and your team? Do you have a website, social media, and also where can we listen to your podcast?
Yep.
And what is the name of your podcast?
Yeah, the podcast, it's on Spotify, Apple, all the major, YouTube as well, but all the major podcast platforms. It's called Passive Investors Playbook. So I interview people, experts in. Yep. Thank you. Top 10%. Not on the level yet.
He's only been doing it since April. So crushing it.
But I interview experts in real estate. I had a guy that was a wine and whiskey fund, which was really cool. But just about real estate and some assets that are most people wouldn't ever think about investing in. So that's on, like I said, all the major platforms, podcast platforms. We do have a website. It is strictly multifamily. It's hkiglc.com. Probably the absolute best way to just talk to me, reach out, is either through LinkedIn or Facebook, Charlie Hardage. There's not many of us. Those are the best. And I love talking to people, even if you never want to invest with me, but you just curious about something I said, like love to talk to people about that stuff. I truly feel, and we talked about this a lot before we recorded, Mike, but I truly feel that this HELOC strategy, the velocity banking strategy, and multifamily syndication has transformed my life and has allowed me to speed up my timeline of 30 years down to 5 years. Love talking about that stuff. So please reach out.
All right. Absolutely. There you have it. We'll make sure we have links to your website, to your social medias, all in the show notes, make it easy for people to find you. So the only thing I ask to my listeners is please don't do it or try to click or copy and paste if you're driving. Got to have that disclaimer there. But hey, all right, Charlie, this has been absolutely fantastic. To close things out, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
If I can do it, you can do it. I'm not this person that I wasn't born with money, grew up middle class, lower middle class. It's really the drive and determination, I would say. So if I can do it, you can do it. I'm not doing anything special.
Love it. Love it. And if I can do it, anyone can do it. So if Charlie can do it, you can do it. But if I can do it, my kids could probably do it too right now. Maybe not. Awesome. They're not of legal age to get money or get a loan, but it's okay.
Hey, they will be.
They will be. They'll get there. So Charlie, again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. I know we had to reschedule because I was having some allergy issues, and people that are listening right now, you can probably hear I sound nasally, still fighting this thing, but I really appreciate your flexibility and taking the time to join me and share your amazing story with our audience. We're all grateful for that. So thank you so much.
Man, Mike, thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome. Obviously recording this, but just talking to you before the show and after the show, it's going to be great as well. But thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. You think we're going to talk after this? Come on, man. No, I'm kidding. Hey,
No, I guess not.
no, hey,
Oh boy.
hey, thanks again, man. And hey, I also want to thank all my listeners. Thank you all so much for joining me and our special guest, Charlie Hardage, on the Average Joe Finances podcast. Go leave us a 5-star review and tell us what you liked about today's episode with Charlie. Aloha from Hawaii and have a great rest of your day. Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. Greatly appreciate you being here with me today on the Average Joe Finances podcast. If you haven't done so yet, make this the episode that you go leave us a 5-star rating or subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Average Joe Finances podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Have an outstanding day.